The meeting of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee is now in session. It's Wednesday, January 10th, 2018. It's 7 p.m. and we're at the Shepherd Hill High School Library. All stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our regular meeting of Wednesday, December 13th.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
I have a,
Ray?
Yeah. Sorry, it was a long one. On page 6, under item D, regarding the subcommittee for signing warrants, I think that should reflect that we established a committee to sign warrants, because it wasn't part of our reorganization in June. So if that could just be that we established a warrant
Right.
subcommittee in containing those members, I think it is good. And then on page 7, right before item E, under the statement there about the committee members took exception to the remarks, I'm not comfortable with that statement. I don't know if that's reflective of everyone.
Some committee members did. You want my name there? I'll put it in there.
I think it would be.
I took exception to that comment, so you can change it to mine. I think Joe did too, but he didn't say it out loud, so I'll
Okay.
take it to say I took exception to the remark. And say as she.
And I had pointed out just a couple of grammatical spelling things to Sandy. That's it. Yeah.
Anyone else? All in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our executive session on Wednesday, December 13th.
So moved.
second.
Discussion?
Mrs. Antoshi wasn't there, but she's listed as
Okay.
yes, but she's listed as being there.
Yeah. But.
You were there in spirit, in
Spirit.
the Christmas
But
spirit.
you were at our meeting, so you voted fine.
No,
She
but
was at the meeting, but not the
the executive
executive.
session
Yeah, right.
says yes.
Anyone else? Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, motion carries, and there's one, is it abstention, or just not here?
Not present.
Not present. Okay. Approval of the warrant, and do we have a warrant this evening? Okay. Citizens Forum, anyone this evening that would like to come forward to speak with us? No? Okay. School Spotlight, Dudley Elementary School, and Greg will get them.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to introduce, I'm not talking because it's really all about them. And at Dudley Elementary School last year, Mrs. Waybats introduced our gardening club. So we're presenting our gardening club that's here tonight. It was a wonderful program that we hope will be years and years and grow and grow. And I just love it. They were there in the summertime. It was just, they were awesome. So I'm gonna let them talk about it because it's really great. So Ms. Waybeck?
All right, so welcome, thanks for having us. I said to the boys and girls that the one thing that was great was as I entered a new classroom space at Dudley Elementary School, I looked out my window and there were these empty garden beds. So I asked if I could work with them, and Mrs. Eibolton said yes. And so we found lots of great books, and we did writing, and we did experimenting, and we grew seedlings, and then we planted them. And then school was ending, and it's like, we need a garden club. So I sent a note out to all the kids in my classroom that had worked with me. There were about 15 or so children who had helped. And we had, what did we say, 8 or 9 children, and we had some friends that came in the summer. So every Wednesday we got together and we worked on our garden. So I'm gonna let them tell you their memorable moments of their experience at our garden club.
My favorite moment was really just the whole thing because I just like to be there with everyone and gardening.
I enjoyed getting to try the vegetables after they grew, and especially the cucumbers. I liked pulling out the carrots I planted the best. I also liked watching the Jack B. Little pumpkins grow.
I really liked it when the hose exploded and Mrs. Wayback got all wet. I like searching for vegetables to pick in the garden and digging in the pot for potatoes and eating the vegetables after they were picked and at the feast.
So at the very end, when we harvested all our vegetables, we had a feast, a harvest dinner, and everything there, as you'll see in our little brochure, Garrett said, wow, a dinner, and everything was vegetables. So it was really fun. And so I'm gonna have Lucy and Garrett share our favorite recipe from our dinner. So go ahead, you guys can take those out.
So we've actually just made a connection too with the Dudley Women's Club, so we're working out a plan for them to become a part of us this year and this summer, and we're hoping to be on the garden tour with the Dudley Women's Club.
Great. Now, are your vegetables organic? Hopefully.
Organic? They are.
They are good.
They are. You should come over. They're great.
Very
I get
good.
treated to vegetables every Wednesday.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Just curious, how much did you produce and what did you do with the vegetables during the course of the summer, before the harvest dinner?
What were you doing with the vegetables
What
each
did we
week?
do? So think about what we did.
We picked the vegetables each week and sometimes we replanted them.
So remember when we would pick them in Finley? Remember when we picked them, we'd put those big blankets down in the grass in the courtyard? And then, anybody who came and worked in the gardens and weeded and watered, what did you get to take home with you? What did you get to take home? What did anybody get to take home?
Vegetables.
You get to take them home. So so those friends that came during the summer, sometimes as school got ready to start, who did we deliver some of them to?
Mrs. Seibel.
We did. Mrs. Eibolton. Did we see some of the teachers in their classrooms, and did we go and find a teacher and say, here's a squash or a tomato? Yeah, I let them think about what they wanted to plant. What do you think our most successful vegetable was?
Cucumbers.
I think the cucumbers. They were amazing cucumbers. But
Sometimes carrots.
and we grew some really cool carrots. But Garrett, can you tell Mr. Duster about those carrots? They weren't your average carrots, were they?
They were colorful carrots. They were all different colors, like
Really?
purple.
Yeah, they were.
How do you do that? I thought they had to be orange.
No, they were purple, right, Garrett?
Purple?
Yeah.
How do you make
So our
that
garden
happen?
is in the courtyard. If you've been at Dudley Elementary School, we're a big rectangle, and then
Yeah.
in the center, there's this grassy area that had just been overgrown grass. So it's been a nice transformation. We have some bird feeders out there, so it's really becoming kind of a fun place for all the kids to watch the garden grow. So that's how our garden
That's a
grows.
lot of fun.
I have another question. Did you guys grow any herbs?
No, we didn't.
No.
What do we
No,
say?
but what do we have planted? We planted one. Anybody remember what it was? It was at the end of the year.
We planted one herb, and we planted it because Mrs. Gribb likes sage, and I have a large sage plant at my home in Shrewsbury, so I took part of it out, and we have planted it in one of the garden beds, and what we're going to do is have that garden bed be actually an herb garden in that one bed, and actually was at a school where they had a sensory garden, so I'd like to have that one become that too, so that we can think about those herbs and those things that we can touch and smell.
Did you plant any eggplant?
Did we plant eggplant?
No.
No, maybe next year.
Yeah, we're hoping our garden will
Plant them
continue to
out
grow.
Kids, I have a question related to the future now, okay? When you're the person who has to decide upon the snow days, you have a tendency to look forward to the springtime. And so I'm wondering what, and maybe you don't even know yet, maybe Ms. Waybetts would have to answer this, but what's the plan for getting this cranked up again when the weather gets better? And how can I help?
Do you guys have any ideas? I have some ideas. No ideas? Garrett, you don't have any ideas?
When are we gonna?
When do you think we might talk? When should we get together? Oh, next week, okay. We peeked out the window and we saw some really large snowdrifts, but I'm thinking last year we didn't do it until after April vacation. So do you think we should get together before April vacation?
Yes.
And I think the plan's gonna be, and they don't know this yet, but Mrs. Eibel and I have talked a little bit about maybe having one afternoon where we'll have the garden club and have other kids that are interested. As we sent out a few tweets and posted some pictures in the fall, we had some other children who actually, and parents who approached me and said, how did I miss that? How come I didn't get into that? And I said, well, we had kind of an exclusive club, but we're hoping it will grow. And myself and the third grade special ed teacher are going to do some spring planting and more writing and literature to have these kiddos who are, well, Lucy's in 4th and Emma's at the middle school, but some of my third grade friends will work with their classmates as well as I'll work with some of my new second graders. And Finley is at Mason Road School right now, but I said to her she can invite a couple of friends to come in the summer, right? And then she'll be a second grader next year and she'll have the inside scoop when fall comes. So it's exciting, and we have some dads who are interested in helping us improve the heights. The beds need to be deeper, so we need to improve the heights and maybe build a few more. I have to talk to Mr. Tower, he likes to mow the lawn, but I think we're gonna be able to expand them on the perimeter, so the middle can be mowed, so.
Well, if you need any help,
I
you give me an invitation. It has to come from the students, though.
Okay, ready?
And I'll come down with a couple of people from the district office one day, and we'll help you out, okay? I got a great pair
Okay.
of work boots that I can wear.
All right, awesome, we will do that.
Awesome. Can we walk by so that we can see your pictures? No,
Come on,
Oh, you
closer.
go closer.
My eyes are older, they don't work that well. Oh, awesome. Those are huge cucumbers.
Yeah, they are.
Wow.
Oh, you can do it well with it.
Pretty cool. Oh, wow. Yes.
Let's see that again.
It's pretty impressive, actually.
Better than I could have done.
How many pumpkins did you get?
Wow.
Your
Was
fifth
this
round?
funded through the,
What grade are you in? Third? So you got another year and a half.
because I know somebody had done funding.
Is this when
We
you
did
use
have
it
a
out?
foods grant the year before, so we used some materials that were left over from that, and then
Not
just.
thrown away, I don't know what my impression is. Nice job. Like on steroids. Monstrous. It's very good.
Wow.
Zucchini? Wow. That's zucchini, Mrs. O'Connor.
Yeah, I love zucchini.
Nice job.
Wow. Look at that.
It's like a watermelon.
And I'd like to have the opportunity to cook some.
Yeah, I know.
And I think it's towards.
The year before we had done a few.
Not bad.
Yeah, they did a good job for little
Performance
kids.
enhancing, I'm not sure.
That's a goal, don't ask.
If we keep this up, Dudley-Charlton might become farm communities.
We get a break on the price?
Believe it or not, at Commerce, the employees have a thing that they call to do a garden.
They do?
Oh, really? Wow.
Plan, it was a good sized perimeter, so.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Very nice. That was great.
Those are some beastly vegetables.
It's a huge cucumber.
And that zucchini looked like a watermelon.
It's a good thing it's inside a courtyard, because I could see rabbits and squirrels and all that stuff.
And people.
Yeah.
People,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
the worst.
people.
That's cute.
Great job,
Yeah, great
boys and
job.
girls. Thank you so
Thank
much. Parents, thank you for coming out tonight. We appreciate it.
You did a nice job. Was great.
Good recipe.
No,
Be good with a steak.
no, that's
I
vegetarian.
know, I'm
We
just
were lacking
kidding.
the meatless option there, Mr. Bisco.
I know, I gotta work on that.
My son made a nice vegetarian soup yesterday, lentils, and it was really, really good.
It would be nice if it grew, as I was saying to Mrs. Seibold, it would be nice if it grew to a place where the fall harvest could incorporate things into the lunchroom, so that the
Right.
whole school could
That
really
would
get
be.
to see and experience it.
That's
Yes.
actually one of the things that we're looking at and talking about with the food service director.
That's awesome.
So that brings us to communications. Mr. Desto, do you have it?
None from me tonight, Mrs. O'Coin.
How about our members? No. Okay, and I do not have any. Brings us to superintendent's report. Mr. Desto?
Thank you, Mrs. O'Coin. So I have several items tonight. First, I just want to make reference to a great event that occurred last Saturday, this past Saturday. It was the first annual John Pear Be Better basketball tournament, 3-on-3 tournament. And I walked in about, 15 minutes after it started, and I was just amazed that the Shepherd Hill Gymnasium was chock full of people, volunteers working, teams milling about, children. It was a really great scene. And it was a huge success thanks to the many volunteers who planned it and worked at it, and the many participants who played. Players ranged in skill level all across the board, from regular people like me, all the way up to people who could have come literally close to playing in the NBA. Included Shepherd Hill students, past and present. It was heartwarming to see the sheer number of alumni who came back to support this, many of whom were friends with John and his family. And I even ran into one of my beloved former students from Burncoat Middle School, who was at 6'5", was easy to pick out across the gym.
Especially for you, Mr. Desto.
Especially for me. Picked me up in a hug. I was about 3 feet off the floor when he picked me up. And I believe his team won the event. And interestingly enough, even two of our state legislators played in the tournament, Ryan Fatman and Joe McKenna. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who came out and helped out. It was a really, really nice event, and it raised, I don't know the total yet, but I know that they must have done very well financially. Also, just a note to the community that the Dudley-Charlton Education Foundation's annual appeal is currently underway, and it runs through March 31st. As a reminder, the DCEF has funded a good portion of the enriching and innovative activities in our schools by giving grants to teachers each year. So I would ask that everybody please consider contributing if you can, and you can find more information on the DCEF website, which is dcedfoundation.org. Quick note about January 2nd, our Professional Development Day. We were grateful to have had good weather, at least that day, and it was truly a great day. We were fortunate to have Dr. Alan November on hand to speak to our staff from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock. Dr. November is truly one of the world's foremost experts in closing the gap that exists between what students learn in public schools and what they will need in the world of careers when they get out. After he spoke, teachers worked in teams to convert existing lesson plans into activities that are directly relevant to the world our students are growing into. And I must thank Mrs. Allen, Mrs. Aris, and all our principals and the many other staff members who volunteered to lead their groups in the afternoon and for the planning. It was a lot of work. It was well organized, and it was outstanding. Also, just a couple of notes on weather-related issues. Last week was one of the worst weather weeks since I've been superintendent. The combination of the snow, the blizzard, followed by extreme cold and high winds. didn't cause us much damage, but caused a lot of other places a lot of damage, and you see it on the news every night. I did want to mention that Shepherd Hill did have a pipe split last weekend, and I mention it for one particular reason, and that is that it was the good work of our custodians who thoroughly searched their buildings every day, and they found it quickly enough to minimize the damage to where we probably won't even exceed our deductible in what we have to pay to fix it, and no classroom space was lost for when the students were coming back to school. But I want to give this other story as an example of something that I've seen happen for 18 years since I've been in the district. And some of the unsung heroes of our staff are truly our custodians. I don't want to jinx anything because it's a long winter and we have a lot more difficult weather ahead of us. But last weekend at Charlton Elementary School, on a freezing coldest day I can remember, and windiest day I can remember, one of our custodians was in the building, which he didn't have to be, first of all, and he checked every single heating unit in the building to make sure that they were all operational. He found 2 that were not functioning properly. They weren't working at the time, and he got them up and running so that we may have, we'll never know, but we may have avoided what could have been a disaster because he took the time to go in on a Saturday and check everything very thoroughly, not just look around. That happens a lot in this district, and I say it not so much to praise him as to say that that happens with a lot of our head custodians, a lot of our custodial staff. So I would be remiss not to mention that. A time like last week is really a reminder that our head custodians and custodial staff are among our most valuable people. So knock on wood, I want to end by saying that because winter is just getting started. And finally, for the committee's sake, as I mentioned in our package, we do have an agreement in principle with the Nurses Association, but the subcommittee and Mass Nurses Association attorney are giving it one more thorough review. So I expect that we'll bring that to the committee for final approval either on January 24th or the first February meeting. And that is all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Student representative report, and we'll table it for when Rebecca comes to our next meeting.
And just, can I say something? I don't know if you noticed, but in the Rose Bowl parade, the UMass band was there, and I think 4 of our kids were in, including our own Jack Bugan was in there.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so that's pretty
That's
impressive.
nice.
I can add to that.
Go to-
One of them came in, was it yesterday, Sandy, to visit? And it was Gabriella Grandalski. She was our drum major last year. She said there were actually 5 or 6 of our kids
Oh, really?
in it, but they're so expansive that they don't even all really see each other all the time. But she said that they were in Pasadena for 5 days, rehearsing, marching, and eating and drinking and having fun, going to Disney, all that stuff, all at the expense of UMass. So
Oh, wow.
quite a thing. It was
Yeah,
really
that's
quite a
nice.
thing.
UMass is proud of that.
Well,
Yeah.
they've got a
And they
great,
have a
they've been
good-
up here, they've come up here for that October.
sorry?
Haven't they had UMass has come here for
Okay.
that October festival
Right.
sometimes?
But it goes to show you the talent in our
Right,
band and the
right.
hard work that those kids have
Right.
put in, that a great number of them have been already at the Rose Bowl parade, which, by the way, is on my bucket list. I've never been, so I want to go to the football game, not so much the parade, but still.
Yeah, it's nice.
Thank you. That brings us to new business, FY 2019 budget update. And Mr. Desto, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll begin, and this is an item that's going to require a lot of discussion among all of us tonight. So I'll just go through it as best I can, and then please feel free to ask questions or whatever else, because we've got to kind of work this out tonight. So some concerns have arisen from the Charlton side regarding the timeline that we discussed at our last meeting. Now, just as a reminder, we recommended waiting until February 14th to approve the initial budget for the district. And, of course, once we approve that, that then sort of triggers the override number for a special election. And we had mentioned that we're thinking of a special election on or around April 3rd. Remember, if you remember, the reason for the February 14th date was that we don't have the 3 key pieces of information in place, which are the governor's numbers, the health insurance estimate, and the new busing contract estimate until February 7th at the earliest. So with the February 14th being our next scheduled meeting, it was logical at that time to recommend February 14th for the initial budget. So to be more specific about the concern that the Selectmen and Finance Committee in Charlton have, it comes down to this. If we do a special election on April 3rd, the Selectmen must approve it by February 27th in order to meet the 35-day criteria. And that only gives them 2 weeks from February 14th in one Selectmen meeting to discuss, allow public comment, and vote to approve the language we recommend. So when I looked at that, I said, well, that is a legitimate concern. There's no question that they're not off base on that. If the election were to be moved up to March 27th, then the Selectmen must approve it by February 20th, and that's only 1 week from February 14th. So really, the timeline is squeezed on the front end, okay? So the first thing is that I would like to at least give some thought tonight to how much time we would need to give them to discuss and allow public comment, and a February 14th date doesn't give more than 2 weeks. Also, on the back end of that, is everybody with me so far? Because I know I'm talking a lot. On the back end of that, the town election in Charlton is May 5th, first Saturday in May. And the closer ours is to that, I'm being told, I didn't think of this, but I'm being told that the more difficult that will be for the clerk and for other employees to pull together 2 elections within a short span of time. And I'm also told that this could be having a special election April 3rd, a town election May 5th, and then a town meeting 2 weeks after that or a week after that, gives us 3 elections within like 6 weeks. And are we okay with that? I'm told that that too could be upsetting to some voters. So on the near end, it's about the Selectmen having time to do what they have to do. On the far end, it's about whether the elections are too bunched together. I'm more concerned about the front end than the far end, but it's not as much of an issue in Dudley. There's no issue on the far end because their town election is in June. But they do have, it is the same issue as far as the quick turnaround time between when we give them a number and what time they have to debate it and get it out to the public and approve it. I have not gotten any concerns from Dudley up to this time, so I thought it was important to throw that out there. But I guess the fundamental question is do we want to consider, moving our initial budget presentation up a little bit, which would require us to either move our meeting from the 14th to the 7th or do a separate meeting on the 7th, which is the day we get the other information. Or we could do it on January 24th with just projections and no definitive info, which is what we've always done in the past. But so does that question sort of, all that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
When you presented this, do they have to have the figure exact to discuss it? Could you have like a maximum of 5 million? I'm just throwing out a number, knowing that it may change. Could they discuss it before we actually took our official vote on the 14th?
It's a great question. I think we have to present, the question itself has to be specific to the number of dollars,
Right.
okay? But you're saying, could we give them like almost like here's the question, but with a
To be
variable?
determined on the 14th or something. That way they could discuss it in
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
What do you think of that question? Do you have any idea on that?
I don't see, in all honesty, I don't see why it couldn't be a topic of conversation
I mean.
at
It's not like
tomorrow's
it's coming
meeting.
out of the blue.
We had the presentation from Mr. Abrams back at the end of September, and it was pretty clear that where the district revenue was going, where the town assessments were going, and what a 3% budget increase looked like. And I thought we made it pretty clear then that 3% was probably the lowest that we'd be looking at, so.
Because I could think they could discuss it and they could give us input for the 14th.
Yeah,
So why couldn't they discuss it in January and February?
right, because it's not like we haven't provided
Right.
some level of information already.
And they know we want an override. It's just a
Yes.
figure that's not definite.
Mhm.
To follow up, and I think Mr. Matthew had started along the lines that I have, this is not an unknown request that we're going to be coming to. We've been spending quite a bit of time discussing this issue going back to last year. We've met on several occasions. They know, based on those numbers, that the need is there. So it isn't a debate of whether or not an override is going to be asked. It's going to be a debate on the number and whether or not they're going to support the number.
Right.
And in my, with my opinion, the closer we can get to the actual number based on removing things that are variable that we don't know, after the governor's produced his budget, after we've had some numbers that come in that give us a better ability to get closer to providing a realistic number, I think is to the advantage to allow them, even though it's not a lot of time. It's not a debate of whether or not we're asking for an override. It's a debate on how much we're asking for. So I'm more comfortable with us being as close to the actual number than I am about the other issue, because to me, it's not a question of whether or not they're going to support it. They're only going to support it or not support it based on the number that we present them.
So I guess what I'm hearing is I would give them, reach out to them towards the end of the week and say, we're going to present our initial budget on February 14th, which means that by that day, you'll have the exact number that we would like to request that you put on the ballot. In the meantime, I can reiterate the numbers that we've been working with in our minds all along, right? They can debate that publicly. At this point, those numbers are not a secret to us.
No.
They're out there. We've had several public meetings where we've discussed them. So some combination of, I guess the question, which I don't know the answer to, is, can they, if they wanted to have like a public hearing type of situation, could they do that on a number that's not certain?
I don't think so.
I don't believe so, but
Yeah.
But they got-
I'd rather not be premature and give a number and then find out that the governor's budget or a bus contract or something else took us way backwards, and we'd be just fighting for it again next year.
So to speak a little bit to that, I think we all kind of feel the same way about the governor's numbers as we do about the MSBA, that we're almost assured of what that's going to look like, right? Within small amount of give and take. But the transportation contract and health insurance could be, correct me if I'm wrong, could be significant, like $250,000
Sure.
of significant as far as the swing.
Right.
So I do think we need that information. And
I think we would be remiss if we didn't have that.
so to simplify this thing that might only be really complex in my mind, but it is complex, I think, to me at least, I would reach out to them and say, 14th is the date where we'll have the definitive information. In the meantime, what can I give you to help you do what you need to do? Simple.
That's good.
I mean,
I
it's
think in budget and finance, we've discussed a range of numbers.
Yes.
Of as low as to as
Right.
high as.
Yes.
And I think that's information that can be presented to them and say, we're going to land somewhere in between these numbers. And we have had feedback from the town of Charlton as far as the approach that they want us to take with the ballot question. But no one has really come back to us with, what numbers they're comfortable with. We know that there's difficulties reaching the numbers, but no one's come back to us and said, within what you've talked about, this is where we know that we can garner support for you. So tie that in with the fact that they've asked us to try and do this in either one shot. They want us to do it in one shot. And we've debated that as to whether or not that's even feasible for us to do. That's what we talked about at the last meeting.
Right.
So I don't think I think it's a question of the number, and I think for us to do our due diligence, I agree with everyone else that said that we really need to give them the number as close to what it is that we're going to be coming back with as possible. It has to be the number.
Okay.
If I may, I mean, we're sitting here talking about being flexible and having special meetings. Both of those boards could do the same. If it's a timeline issue, they could have a special meeting
Yep.
to accommodate that. And I think if you present it that way, that they have to realize the reality of those swings in the dollar amounts and say, yeah, we might want to do that.
Okay.
Can you put the override vote on the town election, or does it have to be a separate ballot?
No, it could be on the town
That would
election.
save the work of having two elections.
It would, and it would save us money.
Right.
But I think, again, this is my first swing at the bat with this, but I'm told by all people with experience in this area that a special election gives us a better chance to win, just because it's a special, it's special.
Special.
It's an opportunity for those people who are really passionate about the issue to come out and vote only for that, as opposed to the town election where a lot of people are gonna vote no matter whether we're on the ballot or not. And that could work in to our disadvantage. That's what I've been told, and that's where the $7,000 cost of a special election may be worth it for us, in that it gives us a better chance to win. That, I don't have any data to back that up. That's something that I've been told by all superintendents I've spoke to who've been successful with this. Mr. Gilrain I've spoken to a variety of times. So,
We've always heard that, anyway.
I'm just addressing their issue that it's too many elections.
Right,
Yeah.
I think, right.
That's the only way
it would
to
save us.
solve that, yeah.
Right, and it would save us money too.
Mm.
The other thing with that, Mrs. Caballo, would be that we wouldn't be able to do it all, obviously on the same date, in that
That's right.
Dudley's is a month later.
Well, no, I'm saying the Dudley could still be separate.
Yeah, well,
You know,
can we do that? I guess we could, yeah.
I don't think it
I
had to
guess
be
we
all
could.
the same.
No, it doesn't have to be.
So we have
at
the
same
time, it's a Charlton problem that it's back to back.
It really is, yeah, toward the end, yeah.
Just in asking the follow-up question, though, if we wait until May and it isn't approved, we have very little time to turn around and act on our end to finalize our budget
A week.
within our time frame. So I don't think, we had discussed that, I don't think doing it at town meeting time allows us to then respond. If this doesn't pass, then we don't have time to respond accordingly.
Yeah, it's true. So then I will proceed this way. I will put something out to the town administrators and the chairs of the boards. I'll include the committee in the loop on that, which will indicate what our decision was tonight, and, giving them some information, but also making it clear that we'll give them whatever they need, that it's a two-way communication. Then at our next meeting, I will present the educational components of the upcoming budget, and on the 14th, we'll do the numbers part of the budget. And when we approve the initial budget on the 14th, hopefully, you'll approve it, that triggers the number for the override. Okay?
So we all agree to that? Okay. And Elaine, at this time, you can discuss, you had sent me an email a couple of weeks ago about a separate budget meeting.
Right.
So we can do it now.
Well, it was, I had reached out to Mrs. O'Coin because I think just based on the complexity of the number of steps and stages that we have to this year's budget, that I thought it would be advantageous to us to do a separate meeting, perhaps do, a Saturday morning meeting for a couple of hours and look at the budget as far as, what happens between we move forward with minimum local contribution to going forward with what may or may not happen with the override, so that we can talk out what our priorities are and what response that we'll have based on either approval or non-approval of the override. Have that very meaty conversation in that process, so that as things develop over the course of the couple of months, our night meetings turn out to be very effective because we've already had a lot of this preliminary conversation. Just my thought, I know we brought this type of strategy to the committee before. Other districts will have a separate meeting related to that. I know there's always a concern about our night meetings getting really long, and I just think if we did one meeting and made it very effective, and had a lot of that discussion when we have to respond based on the initial budget presentation to the outcome of the override election, we'll be able to respond quickly because we have already developed what our plan is. So it's you know, my recommendation based on how this year is.
So how does the committee feel? Anyone?
I'm not opposed to having an additional meeting so that we can hash some of these things out and be prepared, but I would prefer to have it in an evening.
In the past, we used to have the off Wednesdays. Each principal, the principal would present their budgets on the off Wednesday, so they were strictly budget meetings, so that's kind of the same concept. I agree with Mrs. Antoshi. I think it should be like on the off Wednesday. Plus, we'd have coverage, we'd have to have coverage for that on the Saturday. You know, it should be taped. So I would, if we're gonna have it, I would say on a Wednesday, the off Wednesdays.
I have no objection to that.
I just didn't, maybe I missed this. Is this, we talking about in addition to or in place of the budget subcommittee?
Well, I think the budget subcommittee does the initial work, but I still think that the full committee has to be able to come in and weigh in on what they feel. They may or may not be in agreement with what the budget subcommittee, you know, feels or recommends. We always take these things back to the full committee and have that discussion, but I'd like to have a very concentrated discussion at one time, lay things out. That way, when we come back into being in a position to vote, we've had the conversation already.
And this is just gonna be one extra meeting.
Right.
So I don't have any objection to that. How about you, Stephanie?
I won't be able to do it.
No.
No, but I'll be at the sub-finance and give my, but I can only take Wednesdays that I have the meetings
Fine.
off.
Kathy?
I don't, doesn't matter to me.
Right.
Evenings are better for me.
Evenings, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think it'd probably be on the off Wednesday, right?
That's fine.
So the Wednesday between the regular meetings?
Right, like next week, for
Yeah,
example, or the
and that's
21st.
just one. It's not going to be, there's one
No, yeah,
meeting.
no, I understand.
So
Do you-
we'll set it for that.
Do you want to have it sometime? And, I mean, based on timing, I'm not tied into it. I just think it's an opportunity to have a rich conversation about what we're going to do, no pun intended.
Oh, I have to be there? Oh, gee, you guys can tell me that.
But just to be able to really have the dialogue and debate, and that way when we have to respond, it's already been discussed out.
So timing-wise, what were you thinking?
I don't have a
So-
timing.
So
Right now-
timing-wise, it might be next Wednesday.
The 17th or the 31st, probably.
This
or the
budget
7th. There's only
subcommittee
3
meets
Wednesdays off.
next Wednesday.
Right.
So I would think that you're looking to respond, I don't know, based on that. If we're meeting on the 17th, the governor's budget's coming out on the 24th, maybe that is the meeting that we have on the 7th, is that meeting, then we come back. It gives you time to then come back, develop the presentation to bring forth on the 14th.
February 7th makes sense in so much as we'll have the governor's stuff on the 24th. We don't anticipate anything outstanding there, but the 7th is the day we get, that's the bus bid, right?
That's the anticipation, yeah, based, dependent on some of the conversation.
And what about health insurance?
Same timeframe.
Roughly the same time. So that would be could be a meaningful timeframe.
31st would be good. to
Could
give you
be.
two- Well, we'll give you an extra week to work on stuff.
Yeah, it'll be
The
fine
7th is
too.
kind of cutting it close, isn't it? The 14th, you have to have everything together. Would that give you
To the
enough time?
31st.
Well, now, our regular scheduled meeting, is that in February?
14th.
February 14th.
14.
Oh, okay.
We'll have to celebrate Valentine's Day on the weekend.
It's also Ash Wednesday.
Is it
It's
really?
a double whammy.
And, yeah, and Easter is
April
April Fool's.
1st, April Fool's Day.
I'm thinking,
When did
just
that ever happen?
for discussion, that the 7th is actually better
You think
this
it's better?
time, because we'll have that information, and then we can discuss it as a committee, and be able to definitively put together what's going to be the number for the week later. And that, I'll have enough time, because I'll have worked out everything except for the variable.
Okay, so it gives you enough work. I mean, you'll
Yeah,
have
I
enough
think so,
time.
yeah.
Then I'm gonna ask a request that our sub-finance committee meeting be the week before, after the 24th. So you'll get the final governor
On the 24th.
24th.
that's
So
the
can we have, you know how we were gonna do two?
Yeah.
Is it possible to have one the week of the 29th then?
Let's do it on the 31st.
So that would be February 1st.
Well, it could be January
31st.
29th, 30th,
Yes, it'd be
31st.
Tuesday.
That's fine with us.
Plus the one next week?
Hmm?
Plus the
Plus the one
one next
next
week,
week,
okay.
yeah.
Well, yeah, so we can possibly work that out at the next week's budget subcommittee meeting too.
Right.
We can determine
Yeah.
what's the right day for that
Right.
group.
Yep.
But I think we should tonight, well, we have to tonight determine whether we want to do the 31st or the
30.
7th for a budget meeting.
Sounds is better.
I think
Seventh is better.
7, yeah. Everybody agrees? 7?
I agree.
Do you want to start it early, or is that too hard for people?
What time?
That's what I mean, is it hard?
I'd probably be the only one to be late, so you can start early and I'll
We don't want to.
get there as
We
soon as
don't
I can.
You know what I mean?
You want to just go 6:30, even a little, just a little bit
6:30 would
early?
work better.
Okay,
All right.
6:30.
And where are we meeting? Here or CMS?
So February 7th. I'll stay out of that one. They're both convenient to
I
me.
vote for CMS.
This is closer to my office and that's closer to my
I
house,
vote
so
for
I don't care.
Dudley.
Dudley's fine with me. You live closer to Dudley than Charlton.
Well, I'm not gonna be able to be
Oh,
here.
that's right.
Yeah.
Do I get the
Unless we get a
say?
snow day.
I know I don't get
The
to say, that's all I know.
chairperson sets those dates and
Sets the
places.
date and the place, right?
Well,
Dudley.
Mr. Chalk, you have a really tight schedule. What is close, what can
They're
you get
about-
to
they're
quicker?
about the same.
Oh, that doesn't help. I thought I had a great
I'm
idea.
Sweden here, or Switzerland, I should say.
So,
Sorry.
because I don't like to drive at night, I'll say
Shepherd Hill
Dudley.
it is.
Shepherd Hill's fine.
Shepherd Hill.
Well, maybe the fairest thing to do is if we're doing,
Oh, here we go.
well, I'm just saying, I doubt
involved.
this, listen, really, if this is not the last time that we're gonna do a special meeting,
Okay,
then
that's
if
right.
it's early in the month, it's in Dudley, and if it's late in the month, it's in Charlton, just like we do for the other meeting. No?
Fine.
Fine with me.
This one's early in the month, so sure.
I mean, they're both the same to me, so.
That's
I love
fine.
both schools.
So we'll be fair, we'll do it in Dudley, but if we have to do another meeting, I'll say we'll do it in Charlton.
It's fine.
Is it fine? Okay,
You can bake brownies to pay back. for-
okay. I'll make something.
Go up,
okay.
you can make a Kowalski.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have coffee at that one.
Yeah.
Think we could pull that off, Mr. Chaplin? No?
No.
You haven't sold the coffee machines, have you?
There's a Keurig in the office, right?
Yes.
We'll just
Yeah.
buy a box of pods and.
So, okay,
All right, I think I have it. So we're
You
gonna
got
do,
it?
yeah, we're gonna do February 7th as a special meeting for budget, 6:30 at Shepherd Hill. 14th will be the initial budget. January 24th, I'll do the educational component of the budget. And subcommittee is still on the 18th. And we'll determine if we need, if and when the next one is after.
That's starting at 10. Is that a mistake, or is it supposed to be 10?
Yeah, it is 10.
Is that right?
Yeah, it came across in the email as 10.
Yeah, but did you want it at 10 or 9? We don't even set that date.
I thought, oh my
They're
gosh,
always
they're
at
they're
9.
not always at 9?
They're always at
They're always
9, but
at
it says
9.
10.
This
Yeah,
says
but
10
on the
Oh,
minutes.
that's a mistake then, as far as I know. 'cause
Okay,
I
I thought
think-
maybe it's something else
Yeah, I
at 9.
apologize. No, I don't.
So we'll be
All
9.
right, so we're there at 9 on the 17th.
Yeah, sorry about,
Good.
it's the 18th though, isn't it?
No, it's
17th.
17th.
The Wednesday.
17th.
10
All
plus
right,
7 is
all right,
17.
fine.
Get a new calendar.
Either way.
No, switch to
Calendar,
2018.
that's-
Yeah, he's probably got
You guys sure you're having a
2017.
meeting or no?
Has he got the right year there? Who's on first?
Oh, man. All right, so 9 AM. I'll switch my little 9. Okay.
Sandy, for the posting, just make sure we have that, because I just messed everything up. 17th at 9 AM.
And Elaine, at the end of the meeting, before we go into,
We're not.
We
we're
don't.
not, but before we adjourn, you can take up the warrant. You wanted to discuss that.
Yes.
Yeah, so, okay? So everybody's got that straight? They know when our meeting is, right?
I think I have it
I
now.
think so.
Okay.
I'm just going to show up every day.
See if the lights are on.
Yep.
Next item is Director of Finance and Operations Report, Mr. Matthew.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of items for the committee this evening. First, donations. Heritage Elementary School has received a donation of $500 from a district parent to help offset lunch balances that are in deficit for specifically identified students. Additionally, the Charlton Middle School has received a donation of $100 for the same purpose from Mr. and Mrs. Calkins.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to accept the donations.
Someone?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Additionally, the Shepherd Hill Regional High School has received a donation of $1,500 from Commemorative Brands, which Balfour is probably the name that you folks know, to offset the expense of the first honors dinner.
Okay.
Make
Entertain a
to
motion.
accept the donation.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. A question was raised at the last meeting about the signing of warrants. I did reach out to the Department of Revenue, DLS Legal Services, who in turn referred me to the Attorney General's office. In running our process by the Assistant Attorney General, he indicated that it's perfectly fine. We do not need to have a posted meeting just for the signature, for the signing of warrants. If the warrant subcommittee wanted to discuss the warrant, then that would need to happen in a posted meeting.
Anyway, we can discuss it now, seeing he brought it up.
So I know we had brought this issue up in regards to the training Mrs. Antossi and I attended with Mars over the fall term, and the information that had been presented at the training from Perry Davis, and I know Mr. Matthew knows him, is contrary to the information that came through the AG's office on the email. So I did call and speak to Steve Henman, who is the Assistant Director of Mars right now, and he has been having this issue come back to him from other regional school districts, because it depends on who you talk into the AG's office. You know, Steve's response was, I'm going to continue to look into this, but if you've been given clearance by the AG's office right now as to how you run this, then you know, he said, just, you know, then you guys are fine. I have some comments and some concerns regarding just feeling very unclear about how we run the process, and that's just something that I'd like to discuss and clarify, just to make it easier not only for current members but for future members coming in. So I've done a little research regarding the warrant process, and I've looked at MASC for guidance that they've given on it, and have uncovered, you know, school districts that do have policies regarding how their committees handle it. And I think that it's something that I'd like to discuss, perhaps in the Budget and Finance Subcommittee. We could discuss it and then come back to the full committee with an approval for it. The one thing that I know has been brought up on occasion in the past is the current process for how we handle warrants, and I find it very distracting to be signing warrants while the meeting is going on and while we're having discussions. So one of the proposals that I wanted to make is that we set our agenda with a time slot of 10 to 15 minutes before our published time, that at 6:50 warrants are being signed, the subcommittee can come in and be here 10 minutes early to sign the warrants on meeting nights. And if members have, you know, a concern or question, they can be addressed at that time, so that the process of the file going around the room and the table while we're discussing other matters is not distracting. I don't know how other people feel about it, but I find it very distracting.
Makes sense, but now it's better also now because we get the warrant online all the time. So basically, here, we really don't have to read it, do we? Isn't everything already been sent to us?
You guys are emailed copies of the warrants.
Right, so basically, all we do is sign it. As opposed in the past, we've kind of looked through what was there. We don't have to do that anymore because we got everything in there has been sent to us already, correct?
It's been sent to you, yes.
The trouble with if we wait till the subcommittee just that night, some of those things are time sensitive, like the payroll and stuff, isn't it? Like between meetings, the subcommittee might still have to.
No, I'm just saying that on meeting nights, that typically it comes to the full committee.
Right.
That it's just taken before we start the meeting, but the warrant subcommittee operating on an off-week
Right,
situation
right,
is its
because-
own thing.
Right, because sometimes she needs us to come in.
Right.
No.
So
Yeah.
this is one of the reasons why I want to kind of discuss it in the budget subcommittee, because I have a bunch of different documents that I'd like to share, But I think even if it's coming to us, that there is a separation between those things that have already been signed by the warrant subcommittee, and it's just there for your review in case you wanted to see it, versus those things that are fresh and are new and now do need a level of review. I think that there's just ways that we can clarify it so that it's making much more sense for the people that are looking at it.
And there's not a problem for us to come early, we're always here. 10,
Right.
15 minutes early and
So-
I
It's
could
just
also
changing it
make
in
it the
the
last.
agenda piece.
You could put it at the end of the agenda, that way people that can't get here, it could be the last item on the agenda, and you can stay and ask all kind of questions then. Right, Mr. Mayor? Can't sneak out.
until
You
a
can't
point,
sneak
sir.
out. Don't sneak
Absolutely.
it out. No, maybe it'd be better at the last item. And then there's time to discuss it without holding the meeting back from starting at 7, if there were an
That's
issue.
an idea too.
Just, I think that we could put this on our agenda the 17th
Yeah,
and discuss it a little
sure.
bit fuller.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Just an update on a couple of things quickly. I plan to bring forward the quarterly reports through the end of December to our next meeting. And the excess and deficiency paperwork has been filed with the Department of Revenue. I did let our local rep know the timelines involved from our perspective in terms of wanting, hoping that we have this number back to use for our budget process. And I was assured that they would do their best to meet that timeline. I did receive a call from him today with a couple of questions, so I know that they're actually looking at it, which is good. So I anticipate that that will not be an issue. The number that was filed, and obviously subject to their adjustment, was for $1.8 million. And the increase is primarily due to no deficit in the Health Insurance Trust Fund
That's a good
this year.
news.
Which is very good news, yes, absolutely.
Can I ask a question about that, Rich, that I didn't get to ask you in the office? Normally this happens so much sooner than this, and I just got, the member district superintendents are informed about the Bay Path one or the Southern Worcester County Collaborative, anything we're a part of but we're not really a part of, I get notified, and I've already been notified about the Bay Path E&D. I'm wondering why, did they tell you why it's taking so long?
No, I know I filed it a little later than I have in the past this year with everything that was going on in terms of the work of preparing the numbers for the override and all of that work. But in general, they generally say that, setting the town's tax rates before the end of the calendar year is a critical thing. So a lot of regional schools are not tackled in the month of December and then dealt with in an orderly basis, come January.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that they weren't gypping us somehow.
No, I don't think that, I think there's a pecking order, and, in all honesty, my first year here, when the DOR reps had all retired, there was that mass retirement, and they brought back some of them, our rep here, Mrs. Reed, had turned it around in 3 days for us, so last year, it took some calls and some prompting to get stuff back, and, this year, they're on track for, taking a couple of weeks, but not an outrageous amount of time, I don't think. Two other things, quickly. Audit reports for the FY17 audit are available in the office. I'd like to invite the auditor to our next meeting, if that makes sense for everybody.
Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
The last time we did that at 6:30 also, didn't we?
And that was going to be my next
Oh,
question.
poor
Do we-
Ray.
Don't wait for me.
I know. Lucky Ray.
We could also.
Yes, how about everyone else? 6:30 is good?
Okay.
And I'm sure
Never
Ray
change on
will.
the post, try to came up.
No?
Get her as soon as we can.
All right, and then the last piece, and this is actually pretty important and pretty critical to our path forward. I had mentioned in December that there was the opportunity to do a joint procurement or collaborate with 4 other communities on our transportation bid. The Central Mass Regional Planning Committee has been taking the lead on this. And it kind of grew out of the joint meetings that we had here, literally at this table, about a year ago. My predecessor, Mr. Trufoni, represents Dudley at that board, and he's been part of this as well. We met in December and, had some positive ideas and some positive feedback, and that has continued up until yesterday's meeting, where when we started to talk about the rule of award, it became pretty clear that we couldn't put it out in the manner that we had originally talked about, which was one scenario where there was a winner-take-all, and another scenario where a district could get its own, set of bids, if you will, for its own routes. So as a result, we're at a point now where if we want to go forward with this, we would be partnering with them in a true one vendor takes all, one procurement for the 5 communities. This is something that has been tried periodically in the state. It has had a level of success in some places and not been so successful in other places. It's different, it's new, it's not the traditional thing, but it's one of those ideas, much like in education, that kind of comes around every decade or so. There are some barriers and some pretty big questions as it relates to the way that Mass General Law is written. Prevailing wage, for example, prevailing wage specifically speaks to a community of 16,000 or more. Dudley-Charlton qualifies for prevailing wage as a regional school district serving 2 towns. The interpretation from the state offices was because this joint procurement, it would be so large, it would qualify for prevailing wage. But legal counsel that reviewed the document didn't agree with that. But if we want to participate in this, we have to give a green light and for the joint participation, knowing that we wouldn't have our own bid, that we would truly be part of this joint collaborative bid. And because of my fear of the unknown, I wanted to bring it to the school committee and get your feedback. Where under the first scenario, where we would be part of the joint bid but also get our own bids, it would have accomplished what we were going to do anyway, so there was not as much concern on my part about the process. Whereas we would be now doing just one bid for all 5 communities. The potential here is that we will do a lot of work to get to a bid opening of February 7th, get a number, but then not one of the other communities may fall out, as part of this, once they see what the number's like, again, especially given the prevailing wage issue. Or we may not be successful in attracting any vendors on the joint procurement, just given the size, or there may not be the expected cost savings that we're all hoping for. So I throw it out to the committee in terms of any guidance you would like to give me in how to proceed.
So there's no harm in doing it, because you can really pull out if you find it is
Absolutely.
not to your advantage.
We're not making any firm commitment, we're not signing a contract that we are absolutely going to do this, sign the contract. We will just simply go through with the procurement and get our number back, and be able to use that as a basis for our budget. It might mean that we're putting out our own bid on February 8th, and that's okay. But again, where it was slightly different than it was originally, I felt the need to bring it forward to school committee, and
So
unfortunately,
what's your recommendation? Did you want to try that, or?
I've never been too reluctant to try new things. I have a level of fear here, I absolutely will admit that. But I don't think it's to such a degree that I would caution you that, no, this is absolutely the worst idea, or a bad idea.
What's your fear, that the bid's gonna be really high?
The fear is that, the fear is the unknown. That truly is it. We may get a vendor from Minnesota coming in to bid on this contract, because of the volume and the size. And they may turn out to be the best vendor in the world. we have a contract that we know it works, we have a bid document that we know is appropriate, and we have a vendor that we're very happy with. That, my fear is the unknown.
All we have to lose is time.
Right.
Yeah, I can see that.
In that, if it comes in on the 7th and there's something there that we're not pleased with, we lose the opportunity to have the definitive information on February 7th of what the busing contract's gonna look like. So then we go forward with our initial budget and override with a projection for busing instead of a definitive number. That's the downside for me.
How long do you have to go out to bid when you do, if you do?
It has to be advertised for at least 2 weeks. Given this type of procurement, you want to have a little bit more time than that.
Would we risk losing our current vendor by
No.
taking this route
No.
You
Well,
mean-
well,
you mean for the future?
for the future? So
We
say-
risk that
say-
anytime we go to bid, but.
Yeah, let me-
Say we try this new approach, and then the bid comes back really, really high, and we want to pull out. So we want to go back to our current vendor, perhaps. Would we be able to do that?
We would have to go back to bid again.
Bidding.
We would go out to bid by ourselves, and
And-
it's
and we
logical
know-
that they would
Which is
bid
another
back.
2-week process.
Correct, but, so to answer, I think, kind of answer your question, if we did do that and we went back out to bid, just as Dudley-Charlton, we are pretty sure our current vendor has the ability to bid on that.
Yeah, what I meant to say is, I don't think this would alienate them from bidding on our contract if we were to do it ourselves.
Can I just ask for, what are the other communities that are involved in this process?
Webster, Oxford, Auburn, Leicester.
Okay, and are any of those communities currently using First Student?
No. No.
Okay,
Oxford had in the past.
right, but Oxford is going from maintaining their own transportation to,
No.
Or is that just
This is for
special
big,
ed?
Oxford had its own for special ed.
Okay.
And they're going to Vanpool.
all right. Does First Student have the capacity, do you anticipate that First Student would bid on this? Do they have the capacity to absorb the other 4 towns?
They're a nationwide company, so they certainly have the capacity. They have, I believe they're the provider for a similar bid in western Massachusetts.
Is there any possibility that they would see our bid numbers and then bid accordingly because they would know what the
Maybe.
tolerance level is and just say, well, okay, that, if we know they're not going for that, does it help us or hurt us?
Once bids are open, that is public information.
Mhm.
Rich, when you say you're concerned about the unknowns, what type of unknowns are you?
This is going to be the first time that we, Dudley-Charlton, Oxford, Webster, Auburn, Leicester, are doing this. And so it's going to be the first contract, the first bid document. And even though it'll be reviewed, it's being reviewed by legal counsel, you never know where there may be a trip up inside of the documents themselves.
Okay.
You never know how the operation is going to ultimately end up, in
Can
terms
that
of.
not be negotiated within the contract that you'll write with this company?
Well, there'll be specifications about customer service and all of those things. It's just, if, again, an out-of-state vendor were to win it, that's great. But then all of a sudden, they've won it, we've got their bid bond, but they can't secure garage or appropriate parking locations here in town. And then they say, they walk away from it in 3 months, say, sorry, guys. Then we're scrambling at the last minute.
But if they've signed that contract, they're bound by that contract to take care of that, correct?
Sure.
Okay.
And if they don't?
Then there's got to be a monetary.
Exactly, but we're still
Payback.
going back out to bid and we're still
You still be
scrambling
going
at the
back.
last minute, that's all.
So I guess, hearing the concern of possibly somebody from another region of the country, I mean, I'm sure there are bus companies that deal with this size pretty regularly. It seems big to us, but there's a lot of big cities and a lot of big areas. And I'm sure you're going to cater to a certain group of bus companies. So I guess I'm saying let's shoot for it and see, because if the savings are there, worst case scenario would be we're 2 weeks behind the ball and we just gotta
Exactly.
go back out.
Just like any, bid process, the expectation is, you can build it up to a certain point, without making it too large, and receive that economy of scale, in the pricing. That's the hope, and that's the driver behind this. And, quite frankly, if we were to step outside of Massachusetts and New England and go into some of the other parts of the country, districts are the size of the 5 districts that we're talking about.
That's what I'm saying.
So there certainly are vendors out there that are capable.
I mean, how far is our bid document deviating from what we currently send to First Student?
The specifications, the scope of service for Dudley-Charlton is going to be exactly the same.
Okay.
It's the rest of the bid document that there's still that give and take, that discussion, this town doesn't like this piece, this town, has this piece historically, we have this piece historically.
So somebody's going to give, and we're all going to
Yeah,
give and take.
yeah, exactly. It's
Okay.
the process of working those details out.
Thank you.
So I think Mr. Chalk is right. I'm sorry,
No,
Mrs.
that's
Cabal.
okay.
Go ahead.
This was a dumb question. So when you do the bid for 5, 6 towns, everyone's going to get the same price per bus per day?
Yes, that's.
Even though the routes might be long or short, that doesn't matter into the
I think
bid?
it does matter. doesn't
Like if I, let's say a bus is, what, about, what's a bus now about a day? About $200 a bus?
Say 350.
Okay, $350, so let's say the bid comes, more or less, let's say the bid comes in at $350, will it be $350 for you, less to Auburn, they'll all pay $350, even though the routes might be
We're
shorter?
still working out what the pricing page is going to look like, and that will drive that.
So
But
we
I
may pay
That
more than
total-
Webster because we have longer routes than like Oxford or
It
Leicester?
may be based on mileage.
Well, that's what I mean, so
Yes,
the,
I think that's a possibility.
And that's factored into the whole total of the bid.
Right.
Correct, but it's similar to our
But we-
argument with Dudley and Charlton and the per pupil and all
Right.
that. It's like, we're gonna pay a certain price no matter what, because we have long routes in
Yeah, that's
Charlton
what I
and so
mean, yeah.
forth.
But
So
we're probably
the
paying
idea
more
that we're
now
paying more than
there.
Webster,
right,
it's about, for us, it's about how much we're gonna save that we would otherwise be paying. But I agree with Mr. Chalk that there's, if I hear correctly what you're saying, Ray, which is that once whatever company it may be makes a commitment, they're committed to us, and they've got to do a good job. It's a contract. What we can't guarantee is the relationships that we've established with the people we currently work with. But we're pretty good at that, and we will find a way. It's just going to be like, to me, it's like, what is the number of dollars we save that's going to make that worth it,
Right.
So
like would they
that's
hire
kind
the
of-
same bus drivers and stuff? Or would these bus drivers be out of jobs? They could lose their jobs too, right?
That is possible.
So you-
It's
that's another-
unlikely, though, from what we're told. It's
There's a shortage.
right.
I know that
It's
they're short,
unlikely,
but they could bring in their own people if they wanted to.
they could, yes, they could, yes.
And those people could be out of jobs.
I would have to tend to believe if you're in the business of school busing, that you're doing that professionally for the most part, especially on that scale. If it was a small company, I'd be more concerned. But if we're gonna be dealing with a bigger company like a First Student, that's what these people do.
All those things factor in. It almost feels like, I just saw a show recently where a guy owned a pharmacy, like his own pharmacy, and then Walmart comes to town, CVS, and this big conglomerate, and it feels different now. And how much do we save that we're willing to give up that feeling that we
Right.
have? But with that stated, even if we go out to bid as Dudley-Charlton, there's no guarantee that First Student gets the bid anyway. There's always a chance.
How many bids did we have the last time? How many?
I believe
We didn't have
it was,
many, did we?
it was only 1 or 2.
Yeah, so,
And I know Mr. Trifoni had, kind of beat the bushes, so to speak, to try to get some additional vendors. And actually, at the last MASBO conference, I sat with a business manager from Connecticut who had been working for a transportation company that had put in, or had looked at the bid here. So,
You had, just a follow-up question, you had mentioned in this process that any one of the 5 communities could decide not to move forward with this process. What happens to the bid process? So if a vendor's coming in and saying, I'm bidding on this with the expectation that I'm servicing 5 communities, X amount of routes, X amount of buses, it's going to be worth a dollar figure, and now one of these communities says no, will that whole bid process fall apart?
likely.
Yep.
Okay.
You'd have to rebid it.
Yep.
Yes, because,
So, so I don't understand why in your conversation that this started off with that the individual 5 communities are not being allowed to continue their own bid process so that they can still be moving forward in the event that the 5.
Because you're trying to keep it as a whole so that everyone is on the same path. So
Right.
if 3 out of the 5 are saying, okay, we're gonna, on the side, we're gonna have our own bids and we'll see which one works best for us, and we'll just pull out, then the whole thing fails anyway. So I would tend to believe, not speaking for Mr. Matthew, but I would tend to believe that was really the reasoning for it.
Yeah, that was the basis of our conversation, that if we tried to do our own procurement while this bid was out, it would prejudice the joint bid.
Okay. Are we in sync with the other 4 communities and what they're paying for buses? Is anybody paying an exorbitant fee more than anybody else? Are we all relatively paying the same thing?
There's some variation. We just have, in this bid, there will be approximately 90 buses, and we have more than half, slightly more than half of them. We've got about 46 of them.
So the other 4 communities are benefiting from us more than we're benefiting from the other 4 communities?
We're the big stack at the table, yes.
Okay.
So if we decide that we don't like the answer and we pull out, what happens to the other communities?
They're going out to rebid, whether
By
collectively
themselves.
or, yeah, but
They
the
could go
4 of
collect-
them, whether they do it individually or collectively as the 4. But same thing could happen if Leicester, if the numbers come back and Leicester doesn't like them, or Auburn, or Webster, or Oxford. So again, it's one of those things where nothing ventured, nothing
You're right.
gained.
Absolutely.
We're not in a position to really lose anything, but it really is a different process, unique, different, and different than what the initial conversation had started out on.
Of course, they always have the problem, let's say we reject that on February 7th, and then we go out to bid, and first student says, well, we're going to jack up our prices because you're stuck with us. You know what I mean? That could hurt us that way, too,
Yep.
Yeah.
because they know we're stuck.
Well, yes, and I don't know if they would be able to know that they were if they knew that they had competition, they wouldn't do that, but I don't know if they know those things. I'm not
There
sure how
wasn't
that
any-
works.
there was very little competition the last time.
They're not gonna have
Past
much,
years.
that's for sure. There
No.
won't be much competition.
I will say this, I don't know if folks had noticed the article in the Telegram and Gazette
Yeah, I
a couple
saw
of
it,
weeks ago. But I think even just going through this process might invite a little additional competition, and that can't be a bad thing.
Right.
The other thing with this is that I feel like if things don't change somewhat rapidly as far as funding formulas and all that stuff, joint procurement regionally is just this is just the first thing we've really tried to do. It's gonna happen all the time.
And the French
going
River
forward.
came from that,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's gonna be more and more of that as time goes on.
Unfortunately, dealing with office supplies and those sorts of things is far easier than transportation.
There doesn't seem to be that great of a downside by trying.
Not yet.
No,
no.
I don't think so either.
So, I think that we should try it. I mean, we can only win, and if we don't like the bid, then we pull out and do our own thing.
All right. Let me ask the committee a question. And it sounds like everybody is saying go ahead. What if we get to the table and only 4 communities say that they want to go ahead? Are you still comfortable with that?
If it's still to your advantage, probably.
Okay.
Our advantage.
So you'll trust my judgment in that particular area?
As you said, we're helping them more than they're
More than
helping
we
us.
are.
And even if it's 4 and you rebid it, I'm sure if the pricing was good at 5, for most all but 1, it's probably gonna be still good for 4.
No, I actually meant
mean,
even
before
before
it
we
goes
go
to
out to
bid.
bid.
Before, yeah.
If somebody drops out between now and.
Oh, yeah, sure, because
Friday.
you're still in a better position at that
Okay.
point.
What's that prevailing whale problem? What about that, the prevailing whale? Wages?
The prevailing
Yeah, but-
wage.
what
Well,
was that?
again, specifically, communities that are smaller, Auburn, I think, needs to file for prevailing wage, as does Webster, as we do, but Oxford and Leicester do not. So
What is that? That's like.
prevailing wage
like the minimum
means
wage?
how much you have to pay
They
the
set
drivers.
They set the seal, the.
Yeah, based on any
And if
existing
you don't do
union
that, you can
contracts.
you can charge them you can pay them as much as you want. You don't have to go minimum wage or any of that stuff? What is that? Could you explain that to me?
Yeah.
Prevailing wage means you have to pay your
Or like-
bus drivers
Right.
a certain.
Like say $20, let's say an hour.
Exactly.
Doesn't it
If
just
you-
mean
if
they
you
have a
don't-
union?
It's
It
more
doesn't mean
than
that they
the
have a union.
minimum.
Okay, so let's say it's
Prevailing.
$20, and
Yeah.
you said someone's not a part of that. Who doesn't have to do that? right now?
Leicester, for
So
example.
they could charge it, only pay them 15,
Mhm.
but this will make them
Well,
all
why
have to
don't
do
they
20?
have to do it? Why?
Because
The small-
prevailing wage only
If you're on
applies in bus
16,000.
transportation if it's over 16,000.
Oh, okay.
But they're gonna have to pay it if you go into this big bid?
That's the ruling we have from the state, but again, the attorney that's looking at this doesn't agree with the ruling from the state.
Wouldn't that affect the bid a lot?
It would absolutely.
I think you'd have to know that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
They will by the 7th.
That's
Well,
crazy.
even before then, we have to have
It has
that
to be, yeah.
finalized.
Because you have to pay them all the same, whether, no matter what town they're
Well,
working in.
we
you'd
have to inform the vendor as to what they have to do, absolutely.
But I mean, every town will pay the same
Not,
in this bid, wouldn't they have to? Or do they?
not if,
It
Not that I-
depends
not
on
that
whose
I-
interpretation is right.
So,
But then, doesn't that become dicey for the bus company? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't wanna drive in that town
Right,
because they pay
exactly.
less
Yeah.
than driving in
exactly.
this town?
Seems like it should be set.
that's their problem to deal with.
Guys, you hit upon the fear of the unknown that I was mentioning before.
That sounds-
If you want, I've got about 999 other of these I can go through.
I think it's
No
a big
different,
responsibility to drive a bus, so I think the prevailing wage is a good thing.
Yeah, but you can't force towns to do it if they don't
No.
have to.
no. But
That's why
That's
it's
why-
possible we'll
That's
go
part
through
of the
this
contract.
exercise and somebody will say, no, this isn't to my liking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want the committee to be absolutely aware of this before we make the final commitment.
No,
I'm
It's worth a
going-
try.
I'm going to go with, we can't not try something new to see if it's going to benefit us. It's more the language of the documents that are concerning to me. You know, too many cooks in the kitchen doesn't necessarily make a good thing.
Mhm.
And if we're more than 50% of the pie, then I would think that you should be the head chef and everybody else could be a sous chef.
Well, I'm not so sure about that particular designation, but I think, a lot of our language is already in the document.
Right.
And there are certain things that are absolutes for me.
Okay, absolutely. I'm comfortable with trying.
So I think we're all set on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda, MSBA core program versus the accelerated repair. Mr. Desto?
Thank you. So have you had to make enough difficult, complicated decisions yet tonight? Because we have yet another one, and I do have a strong feeling which way I would go, but I want to get as much input as I can from the committee, and in the end of this discussion, I'd like to have you authorize me to move forward in one direction or the other. We are, as you know from the last meeting, I let you know that we were not accepted into the core program again for the MSBA. We know what our record has been there, and we were rated as a 2 out of 4, with 4 being the worst, and so we're a couple of steps off from being funded for that. They'll never come straight out and say, you're a long way off, but they'll use every kind of language that doesn't exactly say that to say that. So, Mr. Chaplin, Mr. Matthew, and I have been talking a good bit about the accelerated repair program, with which most of you on the committee are familiar with, because we did that for the doors and windows here at Shepherd Hill several years ago. So, the decision that I would like to try to, if not get a lot closer to tonight, is whether we go with an accelerated repair application this year, which is due in about a month and a week, so we've got to get going on that, and we still have plenty of time to do it. Or whether, if we do the accelerated repair, we cannot do the core program. So we would be we'd be foregoing that at least for 1 year, if not more than that. I've been told that, once you are accepted, once you're successful with accelerated repair, you're pretty much out of the loop for the core program for at least 3 years. Okay, so that's the downside of it. But what we need to do, Shepherd Hill roof is a concern. Now, please understand, it's safe and it's functional, but it's 25 years old at this point, and there are little problems popping up frequently. It needs to get done in the very near future. The Heritage School roof is also 25 years old, and is something that we would have to also consider here. So, if the committee authorizes us to move forward with an accelerated repair application, we would be looking at, if we were successful with that, which we have a pretty good chance of being successful with that, then at least we're moving towards something productive in the capital improvement column. What this would look like is that eventually there'd be a debt exclusion vote, probably in the fall of 2018, with construction starting either in the summer of 19 or the summer of 20. The MSBA would pay 60% of the cost. A roof for Shepherd Hill would probably be somewhere in a ballpark of $1.5 million. Heritage would be more like maybe 700,000 or 800,000, and MSBA would pay 60% of that. If we decided to do that, then we could explore solar and options like that, which would be cost savings down the line as well. But MSBA wouldn't cover that. It would just cover the roof. So, try to think just a couple other pieces for discussion purposes. The debt that we have on the books right now for the middle schools and the renovations at the elementary schools, the last payment on that is June of 2019, next June. And it will open up about the equivalent of about $4.7 million that if we did a debt exclusion, not saying we would, just for the purposes of understanding, if we did a debt exclusion at that time for $4.7 million, nobody pays another dime. That's the equivalent of what's in there now. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And again, the downside is that we're out of the loop for the core program for a handful of years, and there's a reasonable chance that we would not be successful there anyway in that time frame. So I guess at the end of the day, I would recommend that the committee authorize us to submit an application for accelerated repair for the roof, definitely for the roof at Shepherd Hill, and possibly Heritage as well. This is not the official vote that you make to authorize. That comes later. This is just you saying, if you agree, that, yeah, I think that's the smarter way to go this year. And if you don't, that's fine. That's why we have this discussion.
So,
I think I'd rather get the roof done than be pushed back another time, because
Right.
we were only in number 2, and they only did the 4, as you said, right? So
Yeah.
we're told two levels too good.
Gives
Right.
us 3 years to get to a 3.
Well,
That's one way to look at it.
that's an optimistic way.
That's going to be the headline tomorrow morning.
Sorry.
Committee gives Desto 3 years to get to a 3.
To make the school worse.
Drive it down to a
From my
3.
understanding, the MSBA has less money
Right.
to give out as well, so the likelihood that we would get approved is
Slim to none. Mhm.
So I think that we should go with the recommendation that Mr. Desta put forward.
Do you do both, do you put both roofs on the same thing, or do you have to submit 2 different plans?
I think it's 2 different plans.
So one could pass one, you could get one and not the other.
It could. And I want to say, honestly, I'm not really even sure we need to do it right now for Heritage. I mention it because it's a likelihood in the very near future. We definitely need to do Shepherd Hill, definitely. And if, in discussions with the MSBA, they indicate that if there's any way that doing Heritage jeopardizes Shepherd Hill, then I wouldn't want to do it
Right.
this year, because this has really got to be the priority. I was told today by a fellow superintendent that they have a very old building, which has recently had a new roof done through MSBA and has had solar panels installed, and that has turned out to be a very successful thing for them financially. Not that they're not raking in money, but between net metering and savings in electricity, that it's helped them a lot. So I think that for sure Shepherd Hill, haven't explored it yet, but we've got a solar farm right across the parking lot, cut down all our beautiful trees. Sun gets in my eyes now in the afternoon, but who's gonna argue about the sun at this time of year, right? So maybe there's some way of communicating with them and tying in or something. I don't know, but that's another thing for later that I think could be a positive for us.
so I'll entertain a motion to authorize Mr. Desto to go with the accelerated repair program.
Second.
Any more discussion?
Just a question. So, just the timing of this, if we do the roof at Shepherd Hill, and that's a vote that we do in the fall, I'm just looking at the debt at the middle schools coming off the books in June of 2019. We're looking at $1.5 million. We'd actually be returning money
Yes.
to the towns, because
I have some
That's-
thoughts on that.
well, I'm just having
sure
some
we all
thoughts
do.
too about what else can we do so that we're
Well,
not losing access to that. Do we have other capital programs that can then be approached? I know that there's issues at Charlton Middle School with, I don't know if it's the mortar on the buildings or something. I know that they have
issues with
water
leaking as
coming
well.
in, saturation.
Right.
I would say that, this is just for informational right now, but we've had this discussion several times, and I would say that if we got to a debt exclusion vote, and we needed it to be, or not need, that's not the right way to phrase this, but we thought it was prudent for the district to have it be bigger, for lack of a better term. It could include other critical items like architectural work at Shepherd Hill, very important technology infrastructure, which needs upgrading at every school. Now, that's not devices, that's wiring, switches. What's the other? Wiring, switches, and there's one other thing, but nonetheless, that's several $1 million right there.
If I can just make a point to that piece right there, I did happen to attend the professional development on November 2nd with, I don't know if he's a doctor, Mr. November.
He's a doctor, yeah.
He's a doctor. And he was discussing and showing and asking our staff to go on and look things up. And as soon as everybody went on their smart devices, it basically crashed and he couldn't continue to present.
It was slow, yeah.
So if there was nothing other than a perfect example of how we can't be running much at the same time,
Right.
that was a perfect example.
So a note on that would be that I think everybody knows, but MSBA would not reimburse anything other than the roof, but we are still within the window for E-rate, and E-rate could reimburse some components of the IT upgrade. So it's possible we go forward with a $5 million debt exclusion and, $2 million of it is reimbursed or something like that. Maybe that's high, but that's down the line. The first thing we need to do is get the application in for the roof, and then start thinking about those other things if we're successful.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Consideration of request for first-time use of facilities policy, KF. Mr. Desto.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Coin. So I have a request for the committee from the Aspire Dance Company Booster Club. And Aspire Dance Company is typical of many dance companies in that they have 49 girls currently, and most of them are from Oxford, Dudley-Charlton, and Webster. Several of our students are involved. The Booster Club is their mechanism obviously for raising money to help the girls defray the costs of the many things that they have to do. So they're asking to use Shepherd Hills Auditorium to hold what essentially is a fundraising recital type of thing, which we feel, is within the scope of what the facility was intended to do. The Booster Club itself is a nonprofit organization, so I am recommending your approval of their request to use Shepherd Hill, or if necessary, one of the middle schools, at the nonprofit rate, which means they would only pay, if you approve it, for associated costs like custodial and lighting and sound and those kinds of things.
And it's police if they need it.
If necessary, yes.
There's no date on this one, it would just be.
Let me just make sure, I think I have the, Sandy, do you have the original request? I apologize for
I
that.
just wondered, it's not conflicted with anything up here, is it?
Well, that's why I want to
The
hold
middle
off the
school.
possibility
Of
that
the
we could
middle
use the
school.
middle school if necessary, because Shepherd Hill is always so
Yeah.
booked. I don't have the original with me.
But we have alternatives as far as.
We would find them a place, basically.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
Okay, well, I'll entertain a motion to approve the request.
Second.
Discussion? Any more discussion? So it might not be at Shepherd Hill, but you
Right.
will guarantee a place.
We'll get them a place.
Okay. So all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Consideration of requests for home instruction, policy IHBG, Mr. Desto.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Coin. I have one request for the committee. It's a new request to homeschool their child who's in grade 2 for the remainder of this school year. We've reviewed the homeschool plan and recommend your approval.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Just a question. I'm curious, when we have people that withdraw their kids during the school year to do home instruction, I can understand sometimes it's a child, but when
Yeah.
we have a family that's removing, what kind of follow-up do you do to do an inquiry as to what might be influencing the decision. I always have a concern.
Yeah.
If there's something that we don't have, we're not providing,
Right.
that.
Remember we did that survey
We
about a
did- we
year and a
did do-
half ago, and I haven't done one since then.
Right.
And I got back, I think, 5 responses, which were all relatively predictable. But no, we haven't, other than reviewing their end of the year data, we
Right.
haven't done any follow-up regarding that. Maybe that's something I should think about doing again.
I think it should be something that's on the application. People can choose to fill it in or not fill it
Yeah,
in.
That's a good idea.
I mean, we have people that are recurring, and we get that, and there's reasons why people do that. But when somebody withdraws, that's a flag for me that we need to ask that question.
Yeah, at least it's worth finding out.
Mhm.
And it's both children, right? Grade
Yes.
2 and
It's 2
kindergarten?
children.
Yep.
And they're young grades, and that's the other concern. Hmm?
I can't.
It's a favorite town.
It is
Oh,
Charlton.
what town?
It is Charlton, yeah.
So you don't really know the reason for this one,
Okay.
other than this is a good time because it's half year too.
Yeah, I mean,
But they
we have a
must-
sense of what the reason is, but that's something that's, it's very,
Private,
very
yeah.
personal, yeah.
Mhm. But, okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you.
And consideration to approve 2018-2019 school year calendar. And we have the calendar. And who was on the committee now? Mary? So, Mary, maybe you want to address this?
You don't have to, I can start if you want.
Go ahead.
Well, the
Yes,
whole
Mary.
subcommittee is here.
The
How
whole-
about you?
Mr. Duremian, Mr. Foley, Mrs. Allen, myself,
Oh, okay.
Mrs. Antossi, and Mrs.
But I
Reed.
just thought she was the chairperson of that committee.
Well, we kind of, we don't really have a chairperson. We're
Oh,
kind
you
of, it's
don't?
kind of like the Knights
Okay.
of the Round Table,
He is, then he's the, Mr. Desto.
maybe by default, yeah.
Okay, whoever wants to start it.
I'll begin, and then certainly Mrs. Reed and Mrs. Antossi can jump in. We had a great meeting, and we've, over the past couple of years that we've been doing this, we've kind of learned what works pretty well and what maybe we need to continue to keep on trying to find an answer to. And so we're presenting for your approval tonight, the calendar with really, essentially, it's very similar to this year's calendar, and there are 2 changes that I just want to make sure everybody's aware of. The first is that we've tried to add, we're recommending adding 2 additional half-days of professional development. We definitely understand that this presents an inconvenience to some families, but we felt like with a new strategic plan coming into place, which requires our staff to make some changes, some relatively, for some people, radical changes in their practice, we felt that the extra training time was going to be really helpful and outweighs the detriment. So those extra half-days, they're in there. There ends up being, 5 of them, or something like that. And then the other thing is that we've scheduled parent conferences in the spring for grades pre-K to 4 only. And I wrote something down here that I wanted to say about why we're doing that. We're looking at, in lieu of parent conferences in the spring for grades 5 to 12, we're looking at each school being responsible to set up what essentially comes down to a student work demonstration nights, where students would be able to show their learning to parents in the community. Now, because this will have to be done in a staggered fashion, in other words, say Mr. Packard at Charlton Middle School can't have the entire school doing it all the same night. He's got to have, maybe grade 5 one night, or even half a grade 5 one night, and then and so on. It can't be on the calendar because it has to be staggered like that. So maybe we put a note on the calendar that says information will be forthcoming about your child's night. But what this would do is it would give kids an opportunity to demonstrate their work, families a chance to see what their kids are learning. This plays in very well with project-based learning and our new strategic plan. It also addresses an issue we've had, which is that there hasn't been a lot of, I'll use the word success, but that's not the right word. There hasn't been a lot of participation in the spring conferences for the older students. We've been talking about that for a few years, and we've been looking for an alternative to that. So your K-4 teachers are going to have to do parent conferences. So how's this equivalent? Well, it is equivalent because it's a night that people have to be at work, and it's a night that they have to be in charge of something. And with the parent portal online, communication and knowing how your child is doing has never been easier to access. So we really think that it's time to do something like this. We recognize that it's different, it's a bit of a leap of faith, that we don't have definitive dates, but we think that it's time to do this, and if we don't do it, we're gonna just stay stuck for a while, for lack of a better word. So that was the discussion we had. We're kind of excited about it and hopeful that the committee will support this unique idea.
I just have a question from the teacher's point of view. Does that mean they're doing more work because they have to prepare a lesson for that night, as opposed to parents' night, you don't really prepare anything?
Well,
I'm just throwing that out there because
That's a legitimate point.
I could see that as being a union issue.
I don't feel
I
it
don't know.
is, and Mr. Foley and Mr. Duremian didn't feel it was. That doesn't mean that
He's retiring.
nobody will, but, what's that?
He's retiring, what is he?
Well, maybe not altogether, maybe not altogether, but, let me
No,
put
I'm
it
just,
this way.
I'm throwing that out there because I think that's extra work on the teacher.
But the work is already done. All they have to do is set up the date and have the students present.
So
like-
it's something they
it's like
did
a-
in class, like, for example, those
Correct.
shadow boxes or something. They just
Exactly.
show them that night.
That's
The idea is
yes.
really for the student to do the work.
Right.
But
And do the presentation.
So you could make an
and so
argument that, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way in any way, but meeting with the parents may be more difficult than,
for some people it probably is, but I'm
For
just
some,
saying,
yeah.
I thought they had to prepare like a special, this is just showing something they did in class at night. Is that
Correct.
basically it?
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's not how I
Like
read it.
something, like when they
Like
come
when they do
into
here,
us.
when they come here on Wednesday nights for
Yeah.
us, they just do it there.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But how many, so you do only, I'm just throwing out these questions. So if you're in the middle school, you have 5, 6, 7, 8, you're gonna have to do that, the principal's gonna have to be there 4 different nights, or at least maybe 8 if
At
you're gonna do
least,
half
yeah,
8.
I think at
mean,
least 4. And it
That's
can
pretty,
be,
that's a
That's
lot
extra
of,
work.
that's a lot of extra work.
I think if I'm a principal, I'm sitting down with my team leaders or my department chairs, and I'm saying, okay, look, this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah,
Let's make it great, and you tell me when the right time is to do it, and let people select the right time themselves, and then we stagger it and have a schedule for it.
But that's still a lot.
I think that's a lot of extra burden on this administration. They're out every night anyways.
Well, it's, yeah. I mean,
That's a lot of, I mean, I'm not trying to be negative, because I think it's a good idea, but I think it's a lot of extra work for people that do it the right way.
Legitimate argument, no question about it. I mean, if, assuming that they go to every single one, it would
Well, aren't
be.
they supposed to be in the building when it's open?
Somebody has to be, yeah.
I had another question. You took away the professional development after New Year's. You're not having that this year?
No, we wanted to, we like it, but if we were to do that this year, January of 2019, that day would be on Wednesday the 2nd, and then we'd only have 2 days of school that week. So it's kind of getting squeezed toward the end of the week.
Gotcha.
Of course, this week it worked out that
It
way
was
anyway.
perfect.
But, yeah, so that was the reasoning for that.
And my other question is March 15th, Good Friday?
No, Good Friday
no.
falls in April vacation.
Oh, it does, so it's late
Yes.
this year.
It's really
That-
late. I don't know how that works.
That must be
but-
the latest. I think it can only be, that's like the latest.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to see if we could cut that out. Okay,
Yeah, that was one thing we didn't even have to decide on.
that was good.
Yeah.
Well, what does the rest of the committee feel about that for the extra work on the staff? I know it's extra work. You can't avoid it. It is extra work.
If I'll add a comment. I think having an opportunity to move forward with the direction that we're going with the strategic plan, the direction that we're going with what we expect students to do, to the opportunities that we've seen down at the MASC conference with the students that come in and do presentations and the participation. I think it's the direction that what we're going to, and I think anytime you change anything new, that there is extra work because you've got to figure out how to set it up and how to be successful. I think my concern more would be that I would like to be able to, at the beginning of the school year next year, to have each building kind of put their plan out for parents so that we're saying that over the course of the year, we're focusing on 5th grade and in this time, or 9th grade in this time, and set it up so that parents are aware of it. What we've seen here with the development of the art show and the response that comes with that we've seen with museum nights, where we've seen where these special project nights where families are coming in and seeing that, I think that
those opportunities are fantastic. I think it's a great opportunity for students to step forward, speak to what it is that they do, show off what they do to their family and friends. And I think the response that you get back to the building is worth it for me. And I think our administrators will find ways to deal with the work and maybe trade off between a principal and an assistant principal or someone and figure it out. But I think it's definitely worth the leap of faith to go forward with something new, because I really think it is about what the students are doing. We had this discussion last year regarding the parent-teacher conference, and I'm happy to see that you maintained it for elementary schools, because they are well attended, and I think parents need that amount of feedback. But when we get into middle school and high school levels, that's when we're starting to look for students to step forward and to be more of a leader and assume more accountability and responsibility for their education. So I like the proposal. I know it's work, but I don't think it's anything that our administrators can't find a solution to.
Yeah, and I made it sound worse than it is by saying that I really did, because I made it sound like, well, they'll have to be, staggered into 8 different nights, and that's not necessarily the case. When you think about, Charlton Middle's 5th grade, I think it's 5th grade, for example, already does a museum night, that type of thing. The perfect example would be the day, Mrs. Pastore at Heritage School, I think they call it Wax Museum Day or something.
Yes.
It's really cool. It's when the kids dress up and they do their, so if that were an evening event, it could be a whole grade at once in the gym or whatever. So it doesn't have to be 8 different nights. It could be a lot less than that. They're very creative, and we'll figure out a way. So I made it sound a little worse than what it is.
I'm just throwing it out from a
But
teacher's point of view.
your point is well taken, though.
My other one, I'm just throwing out there too. People already kind of complain there's too many half-days.
Yeah.
You hear that from parents. They'd rather have the full day off because it's easy for babysitting and jobs and so
Okay.
forth. So instead of having those extra 2 half-days, why wouldn't you have 1 full day and just add another day at the end of the year? Would that make more sense? Or did you have them like different times of the year, that you wanted one in the spring and one in the fall type thing, or how did you do
Well, we
it?
did, but also the contractual issue, I think, would be affected by that.
Well, that's right, because you had an extra.
But to the point that most of those professional development days, as I looked at it, turned out to actually give families an ability to do a long weekend.
That's what we tried to do.
So, looking at things like this, you're looking at a long weekend opportunity around President's Day. My favorite, St. Patrick's Day, becomes a long weekend. I would be out of town in a heartbeat. But they all seem to turn around to, Columbus Day weekend, that for a family, it actually, to me, is attractive.
If you have a
for the-
job that you don't work on that Monday, not
Well,
everyone has the long weekends.
I understand that, but I think the
I just have
majority-
heard that in the past for years. There's too many, it seems like the kids have a half a day too often. I'm sure you've heard that up here too.
I have heard that, well, what do you do on professional development days and those kind of
Yeah.
things? I haven't had much pushback on with the childcare piece of that, but I'm sure it does exist.
I think it's more of an issue when it's in the middle of the week.
Right.
Because, when it revolves around a weekend, as Elaine was saying, people enjoy that because it's a family time and you can enjoy a longer weekend and so forth. But when it's in the middle of the week, that's really hard to break up your week when you're a professional and you have work to get to. So we try to really maneuver this around the weekends.
I like that idea, the weekends.
Right.
And the kids like it.
Yeah.
That's not an argument. No, we don't get an argument from them ever.
Nope.
But, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I'm in favor of it. I think that professional development is important. I know many districts, it's a regular, I know districts that it's an every other Wednesday, we're doing a half day for professional development for the entire school year. So I think, again, it's a change, it's a little bit new. I'm very interested in what we're planning on doing with the professional development and how we're incorporating it, because we are doing a lot of changes. So maybe we can talk about that at a later point in time. But I think the question that I've heard more is the benefit of starting before Labor Day versus after Labor Day, and was that discussed again during this year, just so that I can have answers
if I'm asked that question again.
Well, yeah, we discussed it. I mean, first of all, we've established this as a routine for at least 18 years. Well, no, the year that the middle school's open
We had to
was,
push it back.
we had to push it because of construction.
Exception.
Okay.
But it's like, kind of like pay now or pay later. If we start after Labor Day, we're going deeper into June, which,
Right.
when you consider snow days, it could be very deep. And that is not a great time for student learning. The better time is the beginning, when people are pretty jazzed up about learning. And we got a ton of positive feedback. I'm talking about like double-digit positive comments, over 20, which is very rare, about starting on a 3-day week and then having the Friday off before Labor Day. People seem, and I can't say everybody, but a lot of people reached out to me and really thanked us for that. So I told them it was the school committee's idea.
We did that years ago when we first started, before Labor
Yeah.
Day. We used to give them the 4-day, the 3-day weekend, 4-day weekend.
So you essentially start with a 3-day week, then a
Right,
4, then
break
a
into
5,
it,
and you
yep.
work it in slowly, and it worked out very well.
I'm not criticizing the work of the, I'm just throwing out questions
No,
as an
that's
idea.
fine.
You know,
Those are
I
great
just want
questions.
answers. So.
So I will entertain a motion to approve the calendar for 2018, 2019 academic year. Okay, do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, discussion, Elaine?
The only thing I want to point out is on the list, it says the first day of school for pre-KK is on September 8th, and that's a Saturday.
Okay, we must not have changed that from this year.
Still that's
So I don't know, I don't
Those
know
poor little
about
kids, they're gonna be-
that. I don't think anybody wants to show
Surprise.
school on a Saturday.
Okay.
So that would be September 10th?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Elaine.
Not a problem.
So, any other discussion? We made the correction? No? All in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. We have a calendar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to the work of the committee.
They did a good job. Very good. Consideration of requests for overnight travel, policy IJOA, Mr. Destro.
Thank you, Thank you, Mrs. O'Coin. So the request today is actually a change from a previous request. The new request now is for the Shepherd Hill varsity cheerleaders to travel to Orlando, Florida in March of 2018. It'll be for the AmeriCheer High School Nationals, which are held at Walt Disney World in Florida. The three-day overnight request will necessitate the cheerleaders being dismissed at 11:10 on Friday the 23rd, with a return date of Monday the 26th. So they're going to the missed amount of school will be 1.5 days, and the cost per student is $870, keeping in mind some of that, I won't say much of that, but some of it is defrayed through fundraising. We're looking at 11 students and 2 chaperones.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the cheerleading travel. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Next meeting dates. School Committee, Wednesday, January 24th, and that's at the Charlton Middle School, 7 p.m.
6:30.
6:30.
Oh, I'm sorry. We changed it. Okay. And that's the one with the auditor, right? Okay. Wednesday, February 14th.
7th.
7.
We were 7.
The 7th.
We're going to meet on the 7th, budget only.
Okay, so all this is wrong.
Well, we didn't know it at that time.
Weren't you
I
taking
should have
notes?
made it, I did up above. Okay, February 7th, right?
6:30.
We gotta drive all the way to
6:30.
Shepherd Hill.
And
Yeah,
it's
you did.
Shepherd Hill, that's the one I wanted at Shepherd Hill.
I can still complain.
Yes,
Keep going. I hope the next one is correct.
I'll let you know.
Wednesday, February 28th, and that's at the Charlton Middle School, 7 p.m. Budget and Finance Subcommittee, Wednesday, January 17th, correct?
That's right.
And
It's 9
it's
a.m.
going to be 9. It says 10, but it will be 9. Okay, future agenda, what?
Are you still doing the 14th, because you didn't say the 14th?
Yeah, she did mention
Oh,
that.
she did?
Yeah, I did.
All right, okay, sorry.
She mentioned that for the 7th.
Oh, true, okay, I was going
Yeah.
chronological, sorry. All right. And then subcommittee on
You got
next
that,
Wednesday.
Stephanie,
Yep.
everything?
At 9, right?
Right.
Okay.
It says 10, but
Yep.
it's 9. And future agenda items, budget, MSBA, nurses agreement, anything else?
You know,
Any
the warrant
members?
item, the warrant.
The warrant,
We're gonna discuss.
okay.
Some point we'll have information about the transportation bid, too.
Okay. And anything else?
Can I just point out, not to get off track, but there is a MASC training on January 31st regarding cybersecurity, to the topic that we had brought up from the school committee conference, in relation to the attacks that schools have been experiencing.
Okay.
But Division 4 is hosting that at Assabet. It's open to everyone to attend. So as I mentioned to you, Blue Hills Regional Vocational Tech has now incorporated that as a line item because they're paying $100,000 that is in their budget to deal with the mitigation of that issue. And it's a line item that we haven't considered before.
Right.
And it might be helpful to reach out and get more information on that, but I'm hoping to go if the weather is favorable. I don't know if anybody else is interested in attending.
I'm interested in attending or at least knowing about it. I'm
Mhm.
also told that that's a huge field for kids to be looking into as a
Yes.
future career at this point.
Yes, the gentleman from Bay Path is.
Don, I don't know his last
is-
name.
Montville.
He organized it.
Yeah, he organized it, so
Okay.
there'll be representation there. so-
Elaine, what time is that?
I believe it's at 6. I'll find the post and I'll send it to you, and
Okay.
maybe you can resend it out. But it's more than just what we have been thinking about. I really hadn't thought about the cost associated with those issues, and we should consider it as part of our budget. We might not be able to fund it, but we really should put it there.
So before adjournment, anything else? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor? We're adjourned.